Welcome to Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. You know the drill. At this point, it's week 9. We're going to be here for the next hour to get you caught up on absolutely everything. Andy Behrens personally is going to guarantee that you win your fantasy matchups today. That's the way it's going to go. Andy Behrens, Matt Harmon, Tera Roberts. I'm Jason Fitz. There's going to be chaos. We're going to answer a bunch of your questions. Andy, why are we so confident? I just made up that you're that confident. I just thought I'd pin you against the wall right as we start the show. How are we feeling today?
Yeah, that is some fake news. As we were coming up to the show, I was busy making a whole lot of bad decisions in fantasy lineups with respect to Jeremy McNichols. So let's not overstate my confidence this week.
Tera Roberts, we'll get to this later, but you are winning yet again our fantasy contest within this show as the champion so far, as obviously the smartest person on this show. How are we feeling coming into week 9, dealing with all of us that are just absolutely getting our butts kicked by you?
I'm feeling great, Fitz. Honestly, I'm just trying to follow in your footsteps here, keeping the tradition alive, and it's going exactly to plan. So it's fantastic. You're there, right there with us too. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I was beaten by it was the thinnest of margins, which makes Harmon just absolutely sigh. Harmon, we need a hug this morning. How are we ready to have the single greatest fantasy football show in the history of hours leading up to this game? Let's go, buddy.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Let's have the greatest show ever. Let's make a bunch of terrible primetime picks. If you're me, let's lose again. Let's just keep running it every single week. Why not? Is this misery? We got a whole week 9 vibe to this entire show right now. We feel halfway there, yet not even close to all the way there. So I don't know how we're doing this morning, but if that little rant there gives you a kind of access into my mental state, I think that's sort of where we're at.
You guys can get involved. Maybe we need your help. I don't know. Hashtag AskFFL. Scott Pianowski is right now out on Twitter X. He's answering your questions right now. It's like leftover candy. He's still got full-size candy bars to give out in the way of advice. Also, when you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at the YouTube chat as we speak. So get your questions in. You guys are already firing it up. A lot of running back questions out of the gates. We will get as many of your questions answered throughout the show as we possibly could. Before we get to any of that, though, you got to know the actives and inactives coming into today. Obviously, all eyes on some of these names. Tony Pollard will be active for the Titans. Brian Robinson Jr. inactive. Amari Cooper added to the inactive list today for the Bills. T. Higgins inactive for the Bengals. I don't know if you know that they play the juggernaut known as my beloved Raiders. In the afternoon games, Puka Nacua questionable. Travis Etienne expected to play. Jordan Love expected to play. Josh Jacobs expected to play. Before we move off of this, Andy Behrens, your thoughts, because Travis Etienne expected to play. Tank Bigsby has been very good for this team. So what does it mean for both of them in your mind that Etienne's going to be playing in this game?
I actually think that situation is relatively easy because we've seen Tank Bigsby is just an early down thumper. He's been great, tons of yards after contact, but he's not really in the game plan when it's time to throw. So they get in 2-minute situations, they get in obvious passing situations, and I think that's pretty much going to be Etienne. So we're looking at a matchup with Philadelphia today where Philadelphia presumably gets out to a lead in this one. I think I'd actually lean Etienne, but I don't love either player this week.
All right, so let's get to the top fantasy storylines for week 9. Tera, your top fantasy storyline is?
It is the battle for the NFC and not just the North. It is the Green Bay Packers versus the Detroit Lions, and it's pretty apt that we just showed the actives there with both of the Packers players that were questionable heading into expected to play here, going to be acted. As a Packers fan, and maybe Andy, you as a Bears fan, you're sharing the same sentiment here. It is so satisfying to see the dominance of the NFC North because there were times when we weren't so dominant, times where we were sometimes a laughingstock, a little bit of embarrassment here, but we have 3 teams in the North that are very much so in contention right now, and one that is right on borderline here. Realistically, all could get in. 2 top teams here, Lions versus the Packers, both 6-win, facing off in a battle here for the NFC. Looking like the road to the Super Bowl is going to head through the North here. Unfortunately, Jordan Love active, but he is hobbled. We also have bad weather there, so there's a lot going on here, him dealing with the injury. Still, this is a very exciting game here from a real football and a fantasy football perspective. at the same time, we've got all of these big offensive assets, but we also have pretty strong defenses here too as well. Green Bay's defense has turned into a turnover machine with the addition of new safety Xavier McKinney. On the other side, obviously we had the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, but they're still rolling defensively as well. You know you're in for a fantastic matchup when you've got top fantasy assets on the offense, plus 2 top 5 defense playing with fantastic stats. There's so many storylines here. Can Jordan Love gut things out and win the game? Does Detroit separate itself and win and stay on top of the NFC East? What's happening with these defenses here? Do we get a Jordan Love bounce back game? This is going to be a fantastic game, even if there are injuries and weather issues going on. I'm really looking forward to it.
Tera using all sorts of words I've never heard before, like playoffs and Super Bowl. Andy, give me your top fantasy storyline coming into this week.
Yeah, well, one of the week's biggest storylines was the elevation of Joe Flacco to the starting QB role for Indianapolis, which thankfully offers a bailout to Indy's receivers, I think. It's not really an ending for Anthony Richardson, but probably an extended reset. He's still only 22 years old, and as everyone knows, he has a crazy athletic skill set. But he's also completed only 10 passes in each of his last 2 games. He can't really crack 200 passing yards, and he's completing just 44% of his throws, which isn't great. Flacco, meanwhile, has just sort of been the usual Joe Flacco. Multiple passing scores whenever he gets in a game. He's been taking downfield shots, too, while completing over 65% of his throws. There's just no question that this is a fantasy win for the Colts receivers. We can't really start any wide receiver when his quarterback is only completing 10 passes per week. Josh Downs and Michael Pittman are now highly playable wide receiver 2s. I think Alec Pierce is a solid flyer as well. Flacco himself, playable in deeper leagues against a Minnesota defense that's been pretty opportunistic and aggressive, but actually ranks 30th in terms of passing yards allowed. Notably, we don't really have an end date on this quarterback switch, so we can feel pretty confident in these Indy receivers moving forward.
I love every ounce of that. By the way, you say it's not the end for Anthony Richardson. I will point out is stolen from Adam Schefter, who told the world yesterday that the only quarterback ever benched by his team during his rookie contract that came back to actually even make just a Pro Bowl was Mitchell Trubisky, a name that Andy Behrens knows well. So maybe the ceiling is Mitchell Trubisky. Wow. All right. Matt, save us from the Mitchell Trubisky talk nobody wanted. What's your favorite storyline coming into today?
Yeah, my pleasure. This headline certainly did not, make all the talk shows in the morning, but I think it is pretty critical. The Chargers are starting to throw the ball more. In the first 4 weeks of the season, prior to their early Week 5 bye, they were 31st in early down pass frequency. That makes sense. That's what we expect out of Jim Harbaugh. That's what we expect out of Greg Roman. But it's not really what we'd expect out of a Justin Herbert-led offense, because that guy is really, really good at football. And coming out of the bye, weeks 6 through 8, they're actually first in early down pass frequency. Their overall pass rate over expectation has jumped up here. And again, I think this makes sense for a couple of reasons. One, Herbert has played great since coming off that bye week. Even if it doesn't always show up in the fantasy points and the stats sheets, he's been fantastic. He's coming off his best game of the season against the New Orleans Saints. On film, looks like a top 5 quarterback. Looks like a guy that you want to put that burden on from a franchise quarterback perspective. And he's also bringing rookie receiver Ladd McConkey along with him. Ladd McConkey's Week 8 film, was just absolutely sublime, dicing up man coverage against the New Orleans Saints, and he gets a Browns defense this week that plays man coverage at the 3rd highest rate. I'm looking at another big week coming for the rookie wide receiver out of Georgia and his quarterback along with him.
Mijo made it. Ask FFL in the YouTube chat is asking PPR, start Sutton or Ladd. Bo Nix is my quarterback. What do you think, Matt?
Well, look, you just start Ladd McConkey, because if Cortland Sutton goes off, you're gonna get the bonus from Bo Nix anyway. So this way, psychologically, you're shielding yourself from any disappointment and pain there. But I do honestly think that Ladd McConkey is the better play here. We've seen literally a 0 target game from Cortland Sutton. While he has a great matchup this week, I just trust Ladd, the player, on that kind of upward trajectory a little bit more right now.
This is where I'm supposed to give you my take. Before I do that, there's a question in here I have to throw to Andy Behrens. I'm sorry, Andy. I'm throwing you under the bus right away. Ask FFL. Thrillum says, loving the show in Canada. Wondering about Julius Chestnut or Jeremy McNichols half PPR. Y'all, I'm asking this because as we were connecting for the show and getting ready, Andy Behrens was talking a lot about Julius Chestnut. So the question is Julius Chestnut or Jeremy McNichols half PPR for Thrillums. What do you got, Andy?
Yeah, first of all, Julius Chestnut, obviously a fake name, can't be a real guy. But I did have him in some lineups right up until this morning when I pivoted to Jeremy McNichols after the Brian Robinson news. I think that's the safest way to go. With Tony Pollard active, you can't possibly expect a big workload for whatever Julius Chestnut is. So I'm definitely going McNichols. We've seen him reach the end zone this year.
What in the wide world of sports is going on here when we're having a debate about Julius Chestnut or Jeremy McNichols? This season has gone off the rails. All right, I'll give you my favorite fantasy storyline for Week 9, which is Miami's offense. Tua came back last week. I expected some rust. There was no rust. If you watched us on Thursday, I talked a little bit about this too. Frankly, so many of us have invested in our fantasy lineup big moments from Miami, big players from Miami. We're expecting big things from Miami, and that is just absolutely fallen apart. Well, if you feel like your season was lost because you were getting no production out of your Miami offense, take a big sigh of relief, because today is the day that you're reminded, hey, this offense clicked. Even though there should have been rust, there really wasn't. They played really well against Arizona. I don't think that they necessarily beat the Bills in this game, but I think they are going to beat up the Bills when it comes to stats. Tua is back. Tua, it means everybody's back, and that means we all eat. And I'm talking from Tua to Taysom to Devon. Everybody's going to eat in this offense, so I'm happy about it. All right. Let's get to some last-minute pickups. These are players that are still out there. You can add. You can still get them in your lineups. Tara, everybody right now scrambling with their thumbs. Help them out. Who's a last-minute pickup?
You would have to go to me first on this one, because this is going to take some convincing. It's Mike Gesicki that you can pick up, and I get it. Mike Gesicki is not always a guy that we want to turn to, a level of inconsistency with him, but he has shown in Cincinnati some upside with big games, particularly when T. Higgins is out. T. Higgins last week was dealing with a hamstring injury. Gesicki had 7 receptions on 8 targets for 73 yards, had a very similar performance in week 2 when Higgins was out. So we got Higgins out again. It's time for Gesicki to continue to step up here. And if you think about it, it kind of does make a lot of sense. Gesicki is less of a tight end and more of just a big receiver. So plugging him in when Higgins is out is just a really easy transition for the Cincinnati offense. The matchup is favorable here. Sorry, Fitz, it is against the Raiders. And with Higgins out, I predict another solid week from Mike Gesicki. If you're looking for a streaming option out there, he could be your guy.
All right, Matt, so give me somebody that's out there that you can still get some love out of.
Yeah, Tara didn't sound all that excited about Mike Gesicki. I could not be more excited to unironically talk about Elijah Moore at 14% rostered. Now, I get it. Everybody's favorite waiver wire darling out of the Cleveland wide receiver room, Cedric Tillman, did provide the encore to his breakout game in Week 7 when he got over on the Ravens in Week 8. Tillman was targeted 9 times, led the team in air yards as the X receiver. His roster percentages jumped up, but that love hasn't necessarily gone down to Elijah Moore, who was the guy that led the team in targets with 11 last week. I said I was excited to talk about Elijah Moore because I was a big fan of him as a prospect. I thought his rookie season was fantastic. I still think he's a good player on film. I think he's just gotten lost in bad environments throughout the course of his career. And admittedly, he wore out his own welcome in New York, so he does need to wear some of that disappointment. But in Cleveland, I've seen it with my eyeballs. The guy gets open. The guy creates separation from the outside, from the inside. He is somebody who's only 14% rostered that I do think can be kind of a deeper flex play for you this week, or simply somebody you just want to have on your bench. While I agree that Tillman's the most valuable fantasy receiver here because he's the X receiver, he's the one of these things doesn't look like the other in the wide receiver room, whereas Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy might cannibalize each other a little bit. If Jameis Winston is going to be in here throwing the football all over the yard, more than just Tillman and David Njoku are going to eat in this wide receiver room. So I think Elijah Moore is somebody that should, at the very least, be on your bench as a depth receiver. All
right, speaking of eating, Andy Behrens, who you got that you think is going to eat this week?
Yeah, I am once again urging you to consider Taysom Hill, weird, gadgety, fake tight end of the New Orleans Saints. Last week, he rushed for 20 yards. He caught 2 passes for 21. He completed a pass. Totally normal tight end stuff. The Saints backfield pretty severely banged up right now with none of the familiar backup options available. No Miller, no Jamal Williams. Alvin Kamara has been playing through injury as well. We are about to get a big dose of Taysom Hill today in the friendliest possible matchup at Carolina. The Panthers have allowed the most rushing yards per game, the most rushing touchdowns on the season. There's just a very good chance we're going to see Hill's highest usage of the year. And there's a great shot that he finds the end zone in this one. If you've kind of been wandering the tight end wilderness, why not just go with a guy who has eligibility at the position, but mostly plays running back? Hill is only rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues, which amazes me. It seems silly given his setup this week.
All right, we got a question on that. Harrison said, good morning, y'all. Hope it's a great football day for you. Between Taysom Hill and Xavier Leggett, who would be your choice in full PPR? Andy, what do you think?
Oh, man. The guy actually going to play today. He was on the injury report, but I would go Taysom Hill here. Again, you have to think of him more as a running back than a tight end, right? So you don't look at that matchup. You have to look at the matchup for an opposing running back against Carolina, and it doesn't get much better. I bet he's going to handle 8 touches, 10 touches. I want that today against Carolina.
Harmon, let me get a question into you real quick because I feel bad for anybody that's lineup is bad. Katano says, how do you guys feel about Keenan Allen? I'm debating flexing him over Mark Andrews. My lineup is stretched. When you say stretched on this, it just breaks my heart. So Keenan Allen flex versus Mark Andrews. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about some of these crowded wide receiver rooms in a segment later on. And it's just tough with any of these Bears wide receivers. Like, nobody's going to dominate the target tree. So you're almost playing at a little bit of guesswork there with Keenan Allen. And I like the usage for Mark Andrews. And look, you're tethering yourself to one of the best offenses in the league right now. This is a team that just traded for Deontay Johnson and was already second in terms of offensive success rate this year. So I would go with Mark Andrews. I think the touchdown ceiling is a little bit higher. And again, you're just tethering yourself to one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best offenses in the league right now, and a guy in Andrews who I do think is trending up after a slow start to the season.
All right, you boys take a breather. You guys get to head to the bench, grab some water. Tara and I are going to get through some Make Your Pick. We're going to look at some tough flex decisions with multiple players submitted by you guys. So first one, Tara, comes from Kyle Roberts, who says, pick 2 to start PPR, DJ Moore, Sutton, or Pittman. What do you think?
So with that one, I feel like the easy way to go there is DJ Moore. I know there has been inconsistency there, but he does have the highest ceiling of all 3 of those guys, so we prioritize that one. Now, between Cortland Sutton and Michael Pittman Jr., I might be, I think I am slightly against consensus here because there is some inherent risk that Matt talked about earlier with Cortland Sutton sometimes having an extremely low floor here. But I love this matchup for Denver's pass game. I see this as a matchup where Bo Nix could easily hit 40 attempts here. Sutton is the guy that I want over Pittman. Pittman just hasn't really looked like himself recently. Josh Downs, we talked about, is really asserting himself, potentially taking over as the wide receiver 1 there. So give me the higher upside option with Cortland Sutton.
All right, the next question comes from Alicia Woodruff, who says, Algier, Bigsby, Mostert, or Eckler. Need one to go with Kamara. Leaning towards Algier. What do you think?
Yeah, prior to the news that we got today, leaning towards Algier might have been the way to go. But now that we know Brian Robinson is out, we're absolutely going with Austin Eckler on this one. Yes, we potentially have Jerry McNichols stepping up there, but Austin Eckler with the receiving upside, getting a little bit of increased volume on the ground as well. Even if he is theoretically splitting with McNichols, the upside will be here for him in volume and what should be a decent matchup for him.
All right, Sam comes in next with a 12-man full PPR saying, choose 2 at flex. Ridley, Coleman, Leggett, Ask FFL. I'll ask Tara, what do you think?
Oh, man. So when we're looking at Calvin Ridley, Mason Rudolph at quarterback again, at least we're actually getting volume here, usable volume here for him. So Ridley is the first guy that we want to lock in here. And then comparing Keon Coleman to Xavier Leggett, who we mentioned is going to be active today, while I do like him, Keon Coleman out there without Amari Cooper now, and he has really been just thriving at the position regardless since the addition of Amari Cooper. He's really coming along, developing well. I think we're kind of seeing a back half rookie surge here. He's been fantastic. Wide receiver 13, 2 weeks in a row now. We got to go with Keon Coleman here.
Hopefully that also answers Bella's question in the chat, asking about starting Keon Coleman. Look at that. All right. Well, let's let the guys take over, have them yell a little bit. It's time for some enough already.
Yeah, it's time for enough already, where we rage about the silly NFL and fantasy narratives that bother us most. Harmon, you're always mad at whatever consensus opinion happens to be out there at any given moment. What do you got?
That felt like a very unfair description of me, but maybe not completely inaccurate.
Not here to be fair.
Yeah, well, since you decided to just make me vulnerable without even being totally, consenting to it here, Andy Behrens, I'll go a step further with my vulnerability and admit to the people out there that I love my job. I would never trade my job for anything in the world. Really enjoy the fact that I get to occupy this space. But right about here, early November, week 9 is when you start to get sick of some certain operations that, if you're just covering the NFL and you're like a national writer or whatever, you don't really have to talk about some of these forgettable operations. But as a fantasy analyst, you do. And that team almost every year seems to be the New York Giants. And I am at enough already territory with the New York Giants, especially this year, because ironically, there are players we care about on this offense. We care about Malik Neighbors. We care about Tyron Tracy suddenly taking over this backfield. And yet, my God, the Giants are they are a life force draining operation. My favorite stat about the Giants right now, and I mean, it's a disgusting stat, but it is my favorite. I took this screenshot from the Giants-Steelers game on Monday night last week. The Giants on third down with about 5 minutes and 14 seconds left in the game. They were 5 of 13 on third downs with an average of 10.2 yards to go on third down. For the new people at home here who are just tuning into the NFL, at the first down, it's 1st and 10, okay? So you have 10 yards to get another first down when you start off at first down. They're going backwards. This is a team that already has a lot of issues, and they're going backwards from first down to third down. I would say that I am definitely at enough already territory with this entire New York Giants, Daniel Jones experience. Like, we're talking ourselves into, maybe Drew Lock will come and save this operation. Spoiler alert, no, he won't. I think the only person who is more sick of the New York Giants than me is their head coach, Brian Daboll, who cannot wipe the expression off of his face how much he does not want to be coaching this team and does not want to have that guy as his quarterback anymore. So yes, I am very much at enough already territory with the New York Giants.
I just want to publicly apologize for making you talk about Drew Lock on the podcast earlier this week. That's my bad. It won't happen again, I promise. Even if he takes over, we don't have to discuss him. I'm gonna pivot to Patrick Mahomes again, and I understand the motivation for some of the Patrick Mahomes criticism that can be found everywhere in fantasy circles lately. It's a fun take, right? He's the best quarterback of the past half decade, and he hasn't been a huge fantasy scorer over the first 8 weeks. I get it. Never mind the fact that he is currently undefeated and he's making a play or two each week that are just absolutely ridiculous and that stun everyone. It is true that his air yards per attempt are at an all-time low, which of course is a reflection of what he has in his receiving core. But we saw last week against the Raiders that Mahomes can still deliver a productive fantasy week when the matchup is right. And it is very right in week 9. Tampa Bay is giving up the 4th most passing yards per game, the 5th most passing touchdowns, and the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks overall. Over the past 2 weeks, Tampa Bay has allowed 9 passing touchdowns. Kansas City has patched up the receiving room a bit. Travis Kelce coming off a nice performance. We have a big week incoming from Patrick Mahomes, who is definitely not cooked for fantasy purposes. I don't want to hear any more of the slander. Harmon, give me one more thing that you're raging about.
I mean, I love you just going to bat for the best player in the NFL every single week, Andy Behrens, but you're right.
I'm out here on a limb. I'm out here on a limb. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to do the hard lifting, the heavy lifting.
I'll give you one more enough already, and this one is more so, and I'm sorry to turn the spotlight of blame back on the people out there, but enough already with complaining about these crowded wide receiver rooms, and I want to specifically talk about the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. Andy, I get it. People have lives out there. I do not expect everyone to tune into every single podcast, read every single article, watch every single episode of FFL. If you do that, I mean, I truly, from the bottom of my heart, love you. All right, I love you if that is the case. However, if you missed it, we talked about this all off season, that these 2 wide receiver rooms and other players here like tight ends, running backs, this is going to be too crowded for one player to consolidate all the power. And sure enough, over the last since week 5, both guys that lead the team in targets, DJ Moore 20.7 for the Chicago Bears, Romeo Doubs 21.7 for the Green Bay Packers. Like, this is what it is. We knew this was going to be what it is, so there's no need to have these outrageous takes about like, oh well, this guy, really disappointing, or this guy because of targets. We knew this was going to be the case. You just have to accept that that's the reality of it and start to adjust your expectations accordingly. So I don't want to hear any complaining about these players. They're all very good. They're just in crowded wide receiver rooms with tight ends that are productive and running backs that are productive. It is what it is.
Oh, I love that one. I fully endorse it. But that's enough of our complaining. Let's bring everyone back in here.
I'm just sad we didn't get Harmon's fan voice that he usually makes there. All right, let's turn to our fantasy game changers for this week, powered by Ram Trucks, where we're identifying some of the most impactful players in one of the top fantasy matchups on the schedule. Sunday night football action. Joe Flacco and the Colts, obviously. Elite headed to Minneapolis to take on the Vikings. Vikings favored by 5.5. That's a fat number, with the over-under 46.5. A little lower than some people expected. So, Matt Harmon, when I say fantasy game changer, you say?
Oh, I say Josh Downs. And there are two sides of my brain at work here. You know, part of me does think like, man, we could have a really good, long, in-depth conversation about, is this the right thing for the Colts to do? Are they throwing the towel in too early on Anthony Richardson, the whole thing? And we've had those conversations. There's space to have those conversations. But the other part of my brain is like, oh, hell yeah, Josh Downs, let's go. Because Josh Downs is a really good player, and when he's been on the field with Joe Flacco, we have been able to see it. In the 3 games that Joe Flacco has taken most of the quarterback snaps for the Indianapolis Colts, weeks 4 to 6, Downs is targeted on 33.7% of his routes run. He also tied Michael Pittman for a team high 5 red zone targets. He scored twice. I think Downs has been the best Colts wide receiver this season by a pretty significant margin, and he's just a nightmare separator in the slot against man coverage. He's not one of these Wan'Dale Robinson PPR scam pop gun slot receiver types. He's a real deal Tyler Lockett type of interior weapon that can get you downfield. The Vikings, Andy mentioned this earlier, they are a scary defense for bad quarterbacks to go up against, but you can get them in some areas, including slot receivers who average 93 yards per game against the Vikings this season. That's a top 6 mark in the NFL.
Well, we're going to hold your feet to the fire. Alberto says, ask FFL, Downs or Tracy for flex and PPR. What do you think?
I mean, I just got all gassed up about Josh Downs, and I said enough already to the New York Giants. I'm going to go with Josh Downs. You follow your heart out there, but I'm going Josh Downs on this one.
I love every ounce of that. Staying true. There we go. All right, Tara, fantasy game changer for you in this matchup.
I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to give a welcome back to TJ Hawkinson as a fantasy game changer. The Vikings have said that he will not be limited. We're getting him well rested. They waited as long as humanly possible to activate him, which usually means that all signs are pointing to him being fully ready to go. And we don't have any 2024 stats yet, but we can look back at 2023. Hawkinson was not a guy who lived off touchdowns. He was a guy who thrived off of being a high target recipient, a high volume recipient, a guy with 95 receptions in just 15 games last year. Minnesota is definitely ready to welcome him back with open arms because they need an additional volume receiver in this offense. Sam Darnold has been a pleasant surprise. And obviously, the big part of that is Justin Jefferson, but he's been the only volume receiver there. And quite frankly, it's not even been really close. The Vikings' second leading target recipient has been Aaron Jones. Jordan Addison did miss a couple of games, but he has just 14 receptions. It's not been pretty. The Vikings desperately need another person to provide volume. And while it can take time to build rapport with a new quarterback, I predict that Hawkinson will immediately become a favorite of Sam Darnold.
All right, Andy Behrens, give us your fantasy game changer.
Yeah, who changes the game more than Sam Darnold? Every time I'm given the chance, I like to remind people that Darnold is taking full advantage of a great offensive environment in Minnesota. He is just obliterating his previous career highs in all the important stuff. His yards per attempt, 8.5. Passer rating is 107.2. Completion percentage is 67.2, which is particularly impressive for a guy who is throwing downfield a lot. This isn't somebody with a low ADOT. This is somebody who is chucking it downfield. Just a very impressive season overall. Darnold has a rushing element to his game too, which generally means 2 or 3 bonus fantasy points for us. And he's about to face a Colts pass defense that ranks in the bottom third of the league. They give up 7.6 yards per attempt. We've been picking on him all year. Darnold also, as Tara mentioned, for the first time this season is going to have his full complement of receiving options, including TJ Hawkinson. So this is the first dose we get of Hawkinson, Addison, Jefferson, all in it together, Aaron Jones. Darnold enters this one with 5 multi-touchdown games on the season, and I'm pretty sure he's about to give us his 6th.
Usually I would give you so much grief for picking yet another big name quarterback to be your feature on it, but we're all just thankful it's not a punter or a kicker. What can I say? We're just thankful. There we go. All right, let's get to some hurry up offense. Let's huddle up. Y'all know what we do. 25 seconds go on the clock. We go around the clock and we get as many of your questions answered as we can. The first one, David Henning says, ask FFL Monday night, Baker Mayfield or Patrick Mahomes. Dave from Wisconsin, longtime viewer, wants this answered by Andy Behrens. What do you got?
Dave is a longtime viewer. Welcome back, Dave. Yeah, I'm gonna go Mahomes here. I mean, everybody's impressed with what Baker Mayfield has done this year. I was particularly impressed with the fact that he actually delivered stats last week without Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. But I don't want a Kate Otten-centered offense. I'm going Mahomes.
The whistle means nothing to this man. Timothy Connolly, half PPR, need 3. Ken Walker, Chase Brown, Dave Montgomery, Kyron Williams, Matt Harmon. What do you think?
Ooh, I mean, these are champagne problems right here. I think the odd man out is going to be Chase Brown. Zach Moss is out. I get that. But at the same time, that run game in Cincinnati has not looked good. So it's a slight edge to Walker over Brown.
Look at that perfect execution. Taking notes, Andy? All right, Riz Diggs comes in next as PPR. Pick one. Tajay Spears versus New England. Deontay Johnson versus Denver. Darius Slayton versus Washington. I got neighbors already. Tara, what do you think?
Oh boy, you got some problems here. We can't go with Tajay Spears. Deontay Johnson is going to be limited here, and that does leave Darius Slayton, who has been, fairly involved in the offense thus far. So I hate to do 2 Giants receivers, but yeah, that's the direction I'd go.
The pity in your voice says everything. H-Cam with the cutest profile picture we've seen yet says, need some help deciding on a quarterback. Standard league, Winston, Herbert, Lawrence, Jones, Flacco available on waivers. Ask Andy, what do you think?
My heart tells me Jameis Winston. I want that to be the answer, but my head is telling me Justin Herbert. Herbert's played really well lately, and Matt mentioned it earlier, since the bye, bunch of pass attempts, over 30 pass attempts per game. So that's where I'm going.
All right, we'll get another one in here from Joe Cool. PPR, Chubbs, Wicks, or Dowdle. Ask FFL. Who am I asking? Matt Harmon. What do you think?
Oh, well, I mean, such a little time to answer the question now, and this is a little bit of a tricky one. I think I'm going to give the edge to Nick Chubb here. Just don't really trust what's going on in the Dallas backfield. Nick Chubb, the usage has been there. I think he's looked good, just haven't quite had the matchup yet. Maybe it's not this week, but I'm still going Nick Chubb.
We got plenty more of your questions coming, I can promise you, and more hurry-up offense. And in the meantime, one of the biggest changes we saw this week has been at the quarterback position. Jameis Winston is now the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. The question is it now or is it for even longer? That's something that they broke down on McCoy and Van Noy on Yahoo Sports. Check a little of it out.
I think that Cleveland may, depending on how Jameis plays, may just stick with Jameis.
Are you saying stick with Jameis after the season, like for next year?
Yeah, if Jameis finishes this season on an up and up, I believe that Cleveland will, just roll with Jameis.
My only question was, I'm not like an expert at the cap and all that, but that's been kind of a topic of discussion when talking about Deshaun Watson, is his cap hit. Would they just move on and take the cap hit, kind of like Denver did with Russ? Like, how does that work?
I think that that's what they would do because it just hasn't worked out. And sometimes you just got to accept, hey, this is a part of owning a business. And sometimes in business, we make what we thought were great business decisions and they don't turn out working out. So I think Cleveland says this was one of those bad business decisions. It just didn't work out. At the time, it seemed great, but it didn't work out. So, we're going to bite the bullet, do what we got to do, and just move on.
You guys are absolutely firing up the chat right now on YouTube. I've got my eye on it. We're going to get a bunch of these answered through the course of the rest of the show. One question that's come up several times. I'm going to get this one in real quick. Alex P says, love the show. That's really why I'm getting it in. We just want the compliments. The most helpful fantasy advice out there. Double down. We're going to answer this question. Half PPR, Rashad White or Bucky Irving? Matt Harmon, what do you think?
Oh, God. I was like, was feeling all that, and then you had to throw me that question. I do think the edge here has to go to Bucky. I think over the course of the rest of the season, he's just a better runner, and he's also getting some of that little check down love as well that Rachaad White is getting. So it's close. I'm not saying every single week Bucky Irving is going to be the guy to outplay Rachaad White. He's also dealing with a little bit of a toe injury. I get that, but he is their best ball carrier right now and is also getting that passing game work that was boosting up Rachaad White's floor. So I think from a rest of season perspective, Bucky is going to be the guy that ranks ahead of Rachaad White.
A lot of your questions coming in, and now some people are just doing Ask Andy. They don't even want the rest of the show involved. I'm just saying, Andy Behrens got a big following. All right, let's get to the next discussion. No, we're sticking around. We're not giving Andy. He's already hard enough to deal with. My God, what's going to happen if suddenly it's Andy Behrens' show? The Andy Behrens show featuring the rest of us. This thing goes off.
I am not the biggest prima donna on this show. Let's just
go on. Who is? Go on. All right, fine.
I'm not going to say. It might be our host. I'm not going to say that.
Guilty. Bucks Chiefs. Let's talk a little bit about that matchup. It's a huge one. Kansas City favored by 9. Chiefs obviously favored over a decimated Tampa Bay team at this point. The over-under on this one's 45.5. Chance of showers out there in Kansas City. When you break down this game, Andy, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the Chiefs' backfield. Kareem Hunt has obviously been one of the better waiver success stories of the season. He has at least 21 carries in each of his last 3 games. He's scored 4 touchdowns during that stretch, but that's the good news. The bad news is that he's not really going anywhere after contact. He's averaging just 2.4 yards after contact per attempt since the bye. Only 1 carry of 10-plus yards in that time. For the year, he's stuck at 3.7 yards per carry. We should give him a ton of credit for coming in basically off the street and taking on a huge role for Kansas City. But also, no one should think of him as a guy who can't possibly be replaced when Isaiah Pacheco returns. We got some good status reports on Pacheco from Andy Reid this week. He is clearly going to return this season, probably before the end of this month. And he's just a much better runner at this stage than Kareem Hunt. Good matchup this week against Tampa Bay. They give up 5.2 yards per carry, so I'm not saying you can't play him. All I'm saying is that you can start Hunt in the short term. He's always a good bet to find the end zone, but he is also just a 5-alarm sell high in fantasy.
All right, so John Sykes asked Hunt or Swift PPR. What do you think, Andy?
Oh, I think Swift against Arizona. Arizona has been a very pliable defense. We can do whatever we need to against them. We can run on them. We can pass on them. I think Swift has looked great for about a month, so I would definitely go Swift there.
All right, so when you break down this game to me, I got to sit here and just be honest. Last week, I thought the Chiefs were going to absolutely explode all over the Raiders, given the revenge factor and how gettable this Raiders defense could be. They didn't, and I think it's just time, even though Andy Behrens just told you, hey, they can put up some numbers. Mahomes can put up some numbers. I think it's just time we admit that this offense is going to be pulling teeth every single week. It's fair to say that Kelsey got enough of a target share to make a big difference in this game, yes, but nothing looks easy for this Chiefs team, and that's okay. That's who they are offensively. I think we keep trying to figure out a way to put a square peg into a round hole and figure out how to make the Chiefs look the way that they did 3 years ago. They don't. This offense is not built right now with the personnel to be that. So frankly, I think this offense is pretty avoidable from fantasy purposes week in and week out. Does it mean the Chiefs are going to lose football games? No. Does it mean that there won't be weeks where some guys are able to pop off? No, but it does mean to me that you can't really rely on that to be the case week in and week out. The Chiefs win because defensively they're great and because Mahomes makes enough plays. That doesn't lead to fantasy football success. Matt, when you look at this game, what you got your eye on?
Yeah, I've got my eye on Bucks tight end Cade Otton. Cade Otton turned out to be the big winner in the wake of all those wide receiver injuries down there in Tampa Bay, despite the fact that we spent all week debating about Jalen McMillan or what about Trey Palmer or Sterling Shepard. No, it was none of those guys. It was Cade Otton, and I expected that to be the case. I didn't expect him to receive as much work as he did. Otton was second among tight ends in expected fantasy points last week, according to Fantasy Points data. Essentially, this just quantifies player usage. So Otton was the second most involved tight end in his individual offense, and he actually ranked 13th among all pass catchers in expected fantasy points, falling in a similar category to guys like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, I mean, if this level of work holds, not only is he going to be one of the most productive tight ends this week, he could be one of the best players of the position over the back half of the season. When you look at this Chiefs defense, it's a great unit. The secondary is really strong. However, teams try to avoid going out on the perimeter, and they try to attack them more so over the middle of the field. Obviously, that is where Cade Otton is going to run most of his routes.
Tara, what do you got your eye on in this one?
I want to talk about the guy that is throwing to Cade Otton, Baker Mayfield, and his dominance this season and the potential for him continuing it, even in a tough matchup here. I'm just going to rattle off some stats because it is time to give it up for Baker Mayfield this year. He is second in the NFL in passing yards, trailing by literally just 8 yards. He leads the NFL in passing touchdowns with 21, with the next closest being Lamar Jackson at 17. He also has the 6th best passer rating in the league. And on top of that, he has just lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but said, don't worry, I can make it work with Cade Otton. He has thrown for over 300 yards in 4 of the past 5 games, including a top 10 finish last week. And the only game where he finished outside the top 10 was against Denver, which is completely understandable here. Now he's getting it done without his weapons, and that's okay. Even in a tough matchup here, because Kansas City's defense is no joke. They're stout both on the ground and through the air. They have not allowed a 300-yard passing game to any quarterback this season. But I think Baker Mayfield stays consistent here, even in the tough matchup. Maybe he doesn't have that top 10, but I think that people are kind of overlooking the fact that he can still get it done here. Looking forward to watching him in this game.
I have created a monster in the YouTube chat, ladies and gentlemen, is now we're getting Ask Matt questions. Somebody even said, I need the reception god to answer this. So I got to get one quick in for Matt because Hasbullah is passing it. Ask Matt, only Matt. Tillman, Worthy, Watson, PPR, pick 1. Flacco, T-Law, Jameis, pick 1. So he's double dipped on you, but you are the god. So I need you to do Tillman, Worthy, Watson, PPR, pick 1.
Cedric Tillman. I mean, that one's pretty easy. Let's go with a guy who can actually beat press man coverage consistently. It's a tougher matchup for sure. Xavier Worthy is touchdown or bust. I think Cedric Tillman is going to get some much more consistent volume. And I mean, Christian Watson at this point he's not even like a full-time player in his offense.
And then Flacco, Trevor Lawrence, Jameis, pick 1.
That one's tough. I'm going to say Trevor Lawrence is probably number 3 here. So it's between Flacco and Winston. What a time to be alive. So let's just get that out of the way. I think I'm going to go with Joe Flacco. I can see that game being a bit more higher scoring. Going to need some more passing volume in that one. And that Chargers defense is playing really good football. They could force Jameis Winston into a mistake or 2.
All right, in a moment, now I've created a monster where we're getting questions just for Tara. All right, we'll get to that in a second. All right, let's get to Primetime Picks. I got a show to run here, people. Primetime Picks coming up now. This is what we do every single week. We pick from 3 different games. You know, you're going to have the Sunday night game, the Monday night game, and then one other elite game from the roster. And last week, I'm going to be honest, thought I had it. For the second time this year, I thought I had it on Monday night, and I looked and I got swiped to the last second. Tara beats me by half a point. I'm not sure if Andy Behrens actually understands the game, but that's okay, Andy. It's just a rough week for you. Tara is in first place where she has been for the duration of this season. And I would like to point out quickly total points on the other side, because I just want to remind you guys how much you were talking earlier this year about somebody not having enough of them. You're both looking at my rear end now. All right, let's get to the picks because of the snake draft. Andy Behrens, for what feels like the 18th week in a row, picks first. Andy, our games: Detroit, Green Bay, Indianapolis, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Kansas City. What do you got for your first pick?
Yeah, I know I told you last week that I had tanked for Week 8 Jordan Mason, but that was actually a double deception because I have been tanking all along for Justin Jefferson in Week 9. You guys walked right into my trap. I'm just taking the best player on the board here.
All right, Harmon, you're up next. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm be honest, a little tilted with the second overall pick. There's a lot of options to go with, but I'm just going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, the best, most consistent pass catcher in the Detroit Lions offense. I'd love to try to do the guessing game with the running backs, but I'm just going to pass on it. I feel like this is a big week for St. Brown.
Yeah, I'm with you as I come to the podium here. There are a ton of options, and it feels like you get nervous here. You get nervous when you have nothing, and get nervous when you have a bevy of riches. I take Jahmyr Gibbs here, and I just hope that I've got it right on these targets and the way they're going to play out. And you guys know I only win when I pick a running back high. Tara, what do you think?
Since you guys took all the Detroit options, the top Detroit options there, I'm going to pivot here. I'm going to take, with my first pick, Aaron Jones. To put it simply, I love the matchup here. A good bounce back week for him. He has been a strong volume strong volume running back here. No one else is touching the ball here. Volume is king. I love the matchup here. So yes, Aaron Jones for the first pick. My second pick here, we talked about Kareem Hunt earlier. I'm going to go ahead and take that one here. I'm just going to use a little strategy, hope that it pays off. There is a particular matchup that has some options that I think I can wait on here. And with this kind of Kansas City Tampa matchup, a little shaky here, I think my best chance was the volume that Kareem Hunt has here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to get somebody else I feel like I can rely on. And when I look at this Tampa Bay Kansas City matchup, there just doesn't feel like there's a lot there. So I'm going to take Travis Kelce, and I'm going to hope that he continues that target share hoss up. I mean, I just said I don't trust Kansas City's offense. That's true. But I got to take somebody from one of these two teams. And if I got to trust somebody at this point in this matchup, it's that, hey, when all things fall apart, Kelce is getting a ton of targets of late. He's turning those targets into valuable receptions. I think that works for him. So, Matt, you're back up. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm certain this is a stupid pick. I would really like to go with someone in that Colts Vikings game, but I just feel like it's going to get bleak fast in terms of Chiefs and Bucks. I'm going to go with DeAndre Hopkins here. Like I said, I don't trust Xavier Worthy. Don't trust that particular player. And look, they get an extra game or an extra week to get Hopkins ramped up here. They're playing on Monday night. The Bucks defense is an absolute joke. So I'm hoping we see more of Hopkins than like 34% of the routes, which is what we got last week.
All right, that means, Andy, you got two straight picks. You're used to this. What do you got now?
I'm going to start with Josh Jacobs. He's coming off a 25-carry, 2-touchdown game, facing a Detroit defense that looks pretty good on paper in terms of total rushing yards allowed, but they actually give up 4.7 yards per carry. It's vulnerable, especially in messy weather conditions. I think I can get a little something out of Jacobs. And then for my second pick here, you know, anytime you can take a transcendent receiving talent who is the unrivaled centerpiece of his team's passing game, you got to do it. That's why I took Jefferson at the top. It's why I'm taking Cade Otton as my third pick. He's got 20 targets and 17 catches over his last two games.
I mean, that is beefy. You may have outsmarted all of us. Harmon, what do you got?
Before I make my pick here, I just want to set the record straight for people out there that Fitz is dogging Andy hard about picking first. We let Fitz take Derrick Henry like 4 weeks in a row, and now he's finally not picking first. This guy was picking first for like 4 weeks, and now he's all over Andy. So I'm sticking up for my good pal, Andy Behrens, here and not letting Fitz do that.
Thank you.
And I'm mostly saying all this because I'm about to do something that I don't want to do, and I'm going to pick with my head over my heart. The heart says take Josh Downs. I love Josh Downs, but I just feel like the mature thing to do would be to take the running back one on the Indianapolis Colts, and that is Jonathan Taylor. Offense should be more on schedule. The Vikings can be had as a run defense, so we'll see if maturity pays off for your boy. It has not yet in my 33 years on planet Earth, but maybe this week.
Which means that I will immediately run up to the podium. Actually, I'll moonwalk to the podium holding the card that says Josh Downs in a way that you can see it, because my goal is not just to beat you, but to demoralize you in the process and rip your heart out as I stab you with the receiver I know you love. No. This is it.
That won't bother me. If Josh Downs does good things, that is good things for me and the people that follow me, so that will be fine.
Please cut this off next week, and if I win because of Josh Downs, we'll just ask Harmon how he feels then. Tara, as has been the tradition for the entire season, I feel like you're picking last because you've been in first place the entire damn time. So who you taking?
Yeah, it's been tough. And because Matt defended Andy, Fitz, I'll defend you. Last week you didn't have Derrick Henry, but you still came within a half point and won George Pickens' ballerina one foot tap there. Yes. So yeah, we're thriving over here. With my last pick, I'm gonna take David Montgomery here. Green Bay's, we talked about Green Bay's matchup earlier and defense being strong, but they are still vulnerable against the run here. I expect both running backs to have a strong game. I couldn't take Gibbs, so I'm taking Montgomery.
All right. By the way, those are our picks. We'll keep you updated how it goes. Raziel says, I only want to ask Tara. Great show. Tara's so awesome. Keon Coleman or Darnell Mooney? PPR. Tara, what do you think?
Oh, this is really, really close here. I did move Keon Coleman up with Amari Cooper out. and it's super close, but I'm still leaning towards Darnell Mooney here. I like this matchup, and I think there's going to be strong volume to both Drake London and Darnell Mooney, so I think we're getting another strong Darnell Mooney game here.
All right, Andy and I are going to take a breather. We're going to let Matt and Tara take over, and they're going to give us a little fantasy face-off.
Yes, Tara, I'm disappointed in you for giving Fitz credit there. But again, in the name of maturity, I'm going to put those differences aside. And we're going to have a good little chat here about Cedric Tillman, Browns wide receiver, who, like I mentioned earlier on the show, his roster percentage is now over 50%. The people have woken up out there. They've added this guy. But let's see where the bar stops for Cedric Tillman. And we're going to rank him against some other wide receivers that have been rostered for most of the course of the year, starting with Ladd McConkey. Cedric Tillman or Ladd McConkey here in week 9, Tera Roberts.
Yeah, this one is tough. Of all the fantasy face-offs that we've done, this is the one where I feel like everyone is just extremely close here. But I am going to go with Ladd McConkey. I feel like we have been slightly overrating Ladd McConkey at times, but the breakout performance there was hard to ignore. We don't want to be caught sleeping here on a potential rookie breakout in the back half of the season here. The matchup against Cleveland isn't ideal, but they are dealing with significant injuries, so I think they are going to be a little bit more vulnerable here. And they've given up big games to receivers recently, so this is another one where I can see some good back and forth here with Jameis Winston at quarterback and Ladd McConkey stepping up on the opposite side there. Big game. How about you?
Very big game. Yeah, and I'm with you on this one. I think it's really tough, Tillman versus McConkey, but Tillman is still in a crowded offense. There's a lot of good quality players over there in Cleveland, whereas with Ladd McConkey, I think he's kind of consolidating that power, consolidating that power in an offense that's been passing the ball more. So I'll go with you, Tara. I'm with you on Ladd McConkey. Let's put Cedric Tillman up against another rookie wide receiver, this one in Xavier Worthy down there with the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm kind of curious what yours is. I can't wait to hear this because I feel like maybe we'll be opposite on this based off what you were saying earlier here. It's extremely close for me, but the matchup is the deciding factor for me on this one. Tillman has obviously been fantastic and more than flash, and I trust the volume here. But when I'm looking at Xavier Worthy in this matchup against Tampa Bay that has been consistently lit up through the air, I don't want to miss out on what could be that breakout performance for Xavier Worthy. Even if we get some more involvement from DeAndre Hopkins this week, I still feel like the Worthy option is just such a high upside play here.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look, it's a great point. You could be missing out on the Xavier Worthy breakout. And really, I think about what Xavier Worthy does well right now. It's not a wide variety of things, but he can run those post routes against zone coverage really well. They should get a lot of those opportunities against that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that plays a lot of zone coverage and doesn't play it very well. That being said, I trust the volume and I trust the role, and I kind of trust the player a little bit more in Cedric Tillman right now. So I will go with Cedric Tillman just based on the fact that double-digit targets, a guy that can really just make good on those big post routes as well. I think he can do a lot of the big play stuff that Xavier Worthy does. He's just probably more a consistent guy underneath. So let's bring up our third and final name here. This one's close to your heart because it's a guy that plays for your favorite team, Romeo Doubs, Green Bay Packers versus Cedric Tillman here for Week 9.
It is, and I talked so much about how excited I am for this matchup for Green Bay, but this one right here, this one is Tillman for me. I prefer him to Doubs, and it comes down to volume, which you just talked about in comparison with Xavier Worthy. Makes complete sense, and it applies particularly here with Romeo Doubs because the volume is just inconsistent. He has seen an uptick since he had his little diva outburst, but again, can you really trust that in this matchup, a difficult defensive matchup, a potential game where Jordan Love is dealing with an injury? We've got all of these guys in the offense, crowded receiver room, just like Tillman, but Tillman has stepped up and shown out in comparison here. So I'm going with the volume play here for Tillman versus the shaky upside of Romeo Doubs. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, we're on the same page with this one here. This one's Tillman for me. Like I mentioned earlier, Romeo Doubs right now over the last, since week 5 at least, he leads the team with a mere 21.7% of the targets. But that doesn't mean that he can't have one of these slower games like we've seen him have previously. So very crowded room there in Green Bay. I get that, like I said, the Browns, a little bit crowded, but I think Tillman can consolidate there as the top wide receiver on the depth chart a little bit more. So with that, let's throw it back over to Andy and Fitz for some players that you might consider starting this week.
I love me some lock it in. Andy Behrens, give me a name you are locking in this week.
Yeah, James Conner managers probably don't need too much of a pep talk because their guy has been great this year. He has 43 touches over his last 2 games. He's on pace this season for nearly 1,200 rushing yards, one of the few true featured runners in the game. But you might be a bit concerned by the Bears matchup. I've gotten some questions involving Conner this week. The Chicago D is totally legit. 4th in scoring defense, 11th in total yardage. I'll just give you a couple nuggets to make you feel more confident in Conner. Chicago actually allows 4.7 yards per carry, and they have given up some pretty big rushing performances. Think of what Pollard did against them, Taylor, Kyron Williams, Chuba Hubbard, they all got him. Also, James Conner has done his best work at home this season. He's averaging over 30 more rushing yards per game versus the road, and he's also gaining 5.1 yards per carry at home. So I think you can play him with total confidence.
All right, give me another lock it in for you.
Yeah, listen, Bucky Irving is a little bit injured. He's trapped in a weird job share. He's facing a very good Kansas City run defense, and I just don't care. I can't imagine not at least flexing this rookie at the very least, unless you're in like a 6-team or an 8-team league. Man, Bucky had an even tougher matchup 2 weeks ago against Baltimore, and he still gave us 77 total yards and a touchdown. He's coming off a 7-catch game, gained 84 yards. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry. Irving also just breaks off 1 or 2 runs each week that make me think he can teleport. He is just not like other NFL runners. He's among the NFL leaders in missed tackles right now, and he has half the carries of anyone else on the leaderboard. So when he is active, I am playing him, period.
All right, this is amazing. We're going to bring everybody back in. I have one question from the chat that's coming in before we get into all of before the guys put everything up. We're doing the hurry up offense. But, you know, I got a 911 question. Well, we'll get to the 911 in a second. We already got Shake and Bake up. Shake and Bake is up. Ask FFL, who would you start in your wide receiver flex spot? I got a toughie. Wide receiver 1-2, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Smith, DJ Moore, Josh Downs flex, Chuba Hubbard, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and any of the wide receivers that don't get selected from above. Thoughts, Matt Harmon?
Oh, my God. I mean, where do we even begin here? I do think I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably the guy I'm gonna start there at wide receiver, and Josh Downs probably gonna be the guy that I flex there. By the way, I love I'm using the time here. I love that you just like, oh, it's a 911 emergency, and you're like, I'll hang up on that for a second and bring this other question. Very good work.
Teamwork to make the dream work. They got the other question up. I'm doing this. All right, Chris was the 911. All caps. Darnold and Knicks. Damn it, this is a 911. I mean, I just like the panache on that. So he's coming in with the 911. Darnold or Knicks, Tara?
Oh, I love Bo Nix this week, but I would still go with Darnold. I love the upside for Nix, but Darnold, all of the weapons we talked about earlier, the matchup here, this is a week where he can absolutely give us a top 10 performance. Very safer option here.
Harmon's right too.
I didn't use
like
up all my
calling
time.
911 and being putting on hold. Like I failed at that. All right, let's get back to the regular 25-second clock, and DJ's the next question up. DJ says Stafford or Williams. Ask FFL. Andy Behrens, what do you think?
Oh, well, that's not fair to make me pick against Caleb Williams, who actually has a pretty good matchup this week, but I got to go Matt Stafford. Coming off just a tremendous performance last week. When he has that full complement of receivers, when he's got Puka, he's got Cooper Kupp, I feel really good about him. Got to go that way.
Look at that. With seconds to spare, no less. The next one comes in from B, who says flex, Raheem Mostert or Tyrone Tracy. Also with the hashtag AskFFL at the end of that question. Really, this one's simple, so it's short, and we'll just see what Matt Harmon thinks.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't have a dissertation to go through on this one. Yeah, it's Tyrone Tracy for me, who is the lead running back for the New York Giants, which is, a hopeless operation, but still better take the lead back than a committee back.
All right, the next question comes in from Lord Sewell. Says, half PPR. Cotton or Ingram for my tight end. I'm 2-6. Can't afford to lose this one. I know that feeling. Tara, what do you think?
Okay, you're killing me because I did multiple videos saying to start both of these guys at the same time. As flexing tight ends, if you can flex a tight end, go ahead and do that. I lean towards going with Cade Otton over Evan Ingram on this one. The upside, number one target there. Go ahead and do it.
All right, the next question comes from Chris. Start Brian Thomas Jr. or Ladd McConkey? Andy Behrens?
Oh, man, I want to start them both. I'd love to know who your other options are because I think McConkey's a really strong play. But I would still go Brian Thomas here. I think they're going to have to throw all day against Philly. Like the matchup for him, love the player.
We have 7 seconds left. Anybody want to say hi to? Okay, no, they're going to move us on. HK says, ask FFL, PPR Flex, Tillman, Chubb, or Coleman. Thanks. Thank you, Matt Harmon, for answering this brilliantly.
Yeah, I think this is another Cedric Tillman one for me. Again, just trust the role, trust the volume. He looks like he's one of these breakout players. And I give him higher odds at like one of those big catches game than I do a guy like Keon Coleman. So that's why I went with him over the rookie wideout.
Perfectly executed. Tera Roberts. Aaron Krolik says Bengals or Chargers D. Tara, what do you think?
Bengals defense. I'm sorry, Fitz. We've got some potential turnovers that are going to happen in that game, so we lean that way. I'll save us some time here.
Yeah, that's well said by you. It's not fun. The fantasy football is fun. The real football is not fun for me at all. We have fun hanging out with you guys every single week. We appreciate you guys taking the time to tune in. If you're new, we're here every Sunday from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, getting you caught up with all the greatest information. On Thursdays, we're here from 7:30 to 8 before kickoff on Thursday Night Football, giving you all the info you need for that game as well. It takes a whole group of people that work their tails off to make the show happen, including following my weird 911 audibles. We thank all of them for the work that they put into this show. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. In the meantime, Andy Behrens, Matt Harmon, Tera Roberts, I'm Jason Fitz. Thank you so much for watching Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. I hope every one of your teams win and your enemies all lose.